In the wintertime, the boys used to go out in the barn and sleep there in the hay. But they had in the house, all they had was a potbelly stove in the dining room, and they had a wood cooking stove. They had no indoor water. They didn't have any electricity. And also they had an outhouse out back, and they had one for the women and one for the men. And they had out there by that, they had had a big chicken coop, and they had a pump outside, and they didn't have any electricity. So when I was a little kid, and I used to go to my grandfather's a lot, they would light with kerosene lamps, and Grandma used to, and all the cooking was done on a wood stove out in the kitchen, and then they had a potbelly stove in the dining room, and they had enough timber, wood, the big woods, that they could, keep the house hot or warm in the winter. I'm talking about my grandparents, my mother's father and mother.
They took over that property then?
Right.
Okay.
And my mother was the oldest daughter in the family. When I can remember when I first started going out there, they had a big flat that probably was 3 or 4 acres. And that used to be their garden. And my grandfather always had either oxen or horses. And he'd plow up the flat, and they'd have, a huge vegetable garden. They had, I think, 3 apple trees. And they had a swamp, which they had a cranberry marsh in, and then one of them, the other one had a wild blueberry marsh, So, and they had an ice house because they didn't have any electricity. The only way they could keep food from spoiling in the summertime was either to can it or to put it in an ice box and put ice in it. So my grandfather used to take ice out of the lake and put it in a log ice house. That was really the only way he had any cash income. He would sell ice for a penny a pound. And people the lake was big enough that it had a lot of cottages around it. And so he'd sell ice to people who had cottages around there and make, maybe $1,000 in a year. And that was the only really cash income. So all this time, when I was growing up, I knew all my grandparents. I knew my mother's father and mother. My mother's mother died of cancer. I can remember going to see Grandma when she was probably starting when she was about 6 months before she died. So I knew her, and I knew my grandfather. When I was older, I used to go out to my grandfather's, and they lived right on a lake, and I would stay out there. On that side of the family, I spent a fair amount of time with my grandfather in the summer times when I was 5, probably 5 to the time I was 10 or 12. And it was great fun to live at the lake where you could go swimming anytime you wanted to. And he had a sailboat, and he taught me to ice sail, and Grandpa was, as long as you weren't into big deviltry, he pretty much let you have your free reign of it.